Boys and girls, sports fans. Ready to take a digital dump on Las Vegas, man?
Yep.
So this is the end of TechEd, right? 3 days?
It is the end of TechEd, and it's been 3 very interesting days, very up and down in some senses, but I think for me at least a lot more positive than usual.
Any surprises? Things you weren't expecting?
I think that the fact that Steve Lucas and Bernd Leukert's speaking almost off the same hymn sheet was kind of interesting, because very often there's a disconnect.
Right.
That was actually quite good. But for me personally, I mean, the fact that Bernd Leukert smiled when we spoke was actually a real positive.
Seemed in good spirits.
He seemed in very good spirits. Yeah.
What would you say to people who weren't really here to take it in? What did they miss? Was it news, or was it like more context of what SAP is doing, or?
Well, there wasn't a huge amount of news per se. Okay, right. I mean, obviously they're talking about the Vora, the analytics thing. Okay, there wasn't a lot of news as far as the product's concerned. Let's put it that way. That's my impression, or at least nothing that hadn't already been telegraphed from a long distance. But what was new for me was the fact that instead of talking about good old ERP, which we've been doing for many, many years, they were talking about a completely new operating system for the business. Okay,
right. And
that for developers is something which I think they're going to have some problems with.
Yeah.
Because as Harold Reiter told me yesterday, he said, an awful lot of people are still in that old ABAP world.
Yeah.
What about yourself?
Well, there were a couple pieces. The developer piece is important. The other piece is some folks might think from the outside that S/4HANA was not given full attention. And I would say to some extent that was intentionally true. We talked to some folks at SAP and they told us that they're intentionally going to emphasize S4 a little more in Barcelona because that's getting closer to the release date. And they made some intentional decisions, which I think is fair to focus a little bit more on the digital change, and that was really the guiding theme. The thing that I think is interesting is they're positioning S/4HANA as the digital core. And what's challenging about that for customers is that for many of them on older releases, getting to that digital core isn't very easy, right?
No, you've got a lot of iteration to go through.
Yeah. And that sort of goes counter to what digital is about, right? I mean, digital is really more about I want to expose something and engage my customers in a different way next quarter before my competitor kicks my ass.
This was the question that I was trying to get an answer from Lucas, and he doesn't really have a good answer, if truth be known. Now, when I was talking to Harold and Phil Lowen, the emphasis has this new strategy, right? They take the view, we've shown this on video, where customers have to renew before they can get to the new, or as Harold puts it, you got to deal with the boring stuff before you can get to the cool stuff. Yeah,
right.
And what he says is, he said that we're all trying to take this journey, and he does a lot of Business Suite on HANA implementations. He said, but it's not getting any better. They're not providing tools to accelerate what's going on and to commoditize it. Right.
Right.
Because again, this was part of the conversation, is that if you're going to go from where you are through to Business Suite on HANA and onto S4, then functionally speaking, you're probably going to be reducing functionality to a certain extent because you're simplifying.
Yep.
But at the same time, it isn't fundamentally different from what's going on over here.
Right.
It's more like a technical upgrade. Okay.
Yep.
Now, I know from experience, and I know from having watched customers of Oracle go through technical upgrades, it's not pleasant.
Yeah.
But it could be a lot easier, and that needs to be managed, right? So that's one problem.
Yep.
When it comes to the new stuff, and the HANA Cloud Platform, for instance, in talking to Chris Kernahan, he was saying to me that there's very little understanding among developers and among people who are trying to do work around the change management aspects.
Right.
So, for instance, they don't know that you can use Git safely. They don't know that you can use Jenkins safely, because those are good repositories for the whole sort of code thing. So there's a lot of education to be done, I think.
I think that's definitely true, and I think the fundamental question around S4, I think, is this question of whether a lot of our analyst colleagues would say, when you're thinking digital, just leave ERP as it is. Let it be a legacy thing and port to it if you need to it, get third-party maintenance if you need to it, focus on your external-facing apps. And what SAP, of course, is trying to say is that's not going to work. You need a modern digital core if you want to power these other things and have your end-to-end view and all that stuff. I think my view is SAP is fundamentally correct in that view, but I think the getting there is the challenging part. And one thing I was investigating this week, which I was able to confirm, was regarding once you get to Business Suite on HANA, which in itself is somewhat of a journey if you're once you get there, what is the process like to get to S4? And can you do it in pieces, or are you going to have to really move, is it a whole new product? And the way SAP is ultimately envisioning it right now anyway, is that it is going to eventually be a whole new product. And now, obviously, if you're on Business Suite on HANA, some of the transitions will be much easier for you at that point. But it is an interesting and bold thing they're taking on. They're not going to try to say, well, you can swap out this component or that component. If you want logistics, you can take that. If you want finance, they might offer finance separately, I think, for a couple more quarters. But in general, if you want it, you're going to need the whole enchilada. And that's interesting.
So yes, it is interesting because as one of your video partners was saying, it's a very complicated arena out there, right? Yeah. I mean, we can talk about this and we can sort of say, well, by and large, we think SAP is correct as far as this is concerned. Try telling that to Colgate-Palmolive, right? Or Unilever or Nestle. I mean, they're just going to look at you as though they're not going to do it, at least not anytime soon.
Right.
Because their landscapes are so complex. They have so many people involved with it. They know their landscapes probably better than SAP does. And there's no reason for them to do that because it delivers what they need and they can still innovate, right? And the example there that I would put out is Nestle via Nespresso. The things that Miyake was showing me around customer engagement. I understand that particular story personally because I'm a coffee freak, right?
Yeah.
And I've written that story, right? Yeah. What I didn't know was that there were big lumps of SAP sat behind that doing some of that stuff, and it's being extended. Talking to Bernd Leukert, they're talking about, the potential for putting sensor technologies into the machines to take even more friction out of those processes. But they're not talking about renewing the core. This is very, very different from that standpoint. Yeah. So, those are your very large customers. The mid-sized customers or the small customers, I can absolutely see why they would want to do it.
Right.
Yes, it'll be painful, but it'll be a lot easier for them because they're not going to have the gazillion of customizations that they will have had.
And going forward, they'll have a much cleaner landscape. And it has to be said that when you talk with customers, and we interviewed a couple of board members this week from ASUG as well, they tend to feel pretty good about SAP's innovation roadmap in general. The questions they're raising is more about how do we get there, and especially how do we build a business case around it, which is a whole different question altogether.
I think, I think this comes back to what I was trying to allude to, and that is that there are different types of customer that SAP serves, and SAP can put whatever message it wants out, but it has to address each customer group as a distinct discrete set of customers because they are different, right? It's not like saying, oh, you know what, I'm going to have this purchasing app and depending on how much stuff I put through it, you're going to be paying X dollars, X dollars, X dollars. That's not the way it is. It's, I'm a small customer. I have a small footprint.
Right. Yeah.
I have specific requirements around inventory, perhaps. That's me, okay? I'm a mid-sized customer. I have global operations, but they're not quite as global as I would like to think, maybe American and LATAM. And then I'm the megacorp that's all over the damn place, right? Very, very different. And I think SAP would do itself a huge amount of favor if it could start to chunk those messages accordingly.
Yep.
That's how I would be thinking about it. Now, the flip side of the coin, of course, is that competitors turn around and say, legacy company thrashing around with all this and that and the other, yada, yada, yada. Just come over here and buy my point solution, right?
Right.
Well, I'm starting to think that that's not going to work either, because, as Lucas said, the digital landscape for tomorrow is not 59 applications from 9 different vendors.
Exactly.
It will be heterogeneous, but not the way he's describing it, not the way that it exists today, rather. So, I think the point solution guys are going to have problems.
Yeah. The interesting thing that I see is just a big shift at TechEd where 5 years ago, guys like Thomas Young and Rich Hellman were giving standing room only ABAP sessions to huge gatherings of ABAP developers.
Yeah.
And these guys now are in HANA.
Yep.
Rich is teaching about SQL and SQL script. Thomas is teaching about HANA-related languages.
Yep.
They're both heavily impacted by open source technologies. They've been taping open SAP courses. And to me, I see a lot of that as encouraging in the sense that developers really now have access, I think, to a much more open sourcey friendly SAP with a lot of stuff they can go on a HANA cloud platform today and start mucking about. The challenge, and what I raised in the press conference, is the message for individual developers around go-to-market is still something they're struggling with.
Yep.
And this is also a bigger issue for them in terms of a lot of their sales force, for example, still isn't aware of a lot of the kick-ass products that are apps that have been built around the platform and around the startup program, and they're not selling them. And then there's like three or 4 or 5 marketplaces, and they're working to consolidate them. And so this is the piece in my opinion, this is what's missing from the developer story right now is how do we get these guys to market? Now the partners can do okay with this because they have the resources to throw at it, but the individuals, we've talked with some of these folks, and they run into a lot of friction around that.
So again, this was something that was brought up with Lucas, and he says yes. He knows it's just a bit too complicated.
Yep.
But my question, which I think needs answering, is that, with these things like Demo Jam, we've just had Keytree on, right?
Right.
Developed something super cool, wins Demo Jam. They've got a lot of inbound interest to do it. So what are they going to do with it, right?
Right.
And how is the knowledge that they are developing going to be encapsulated, available for reproduction, available to be built on, and so on and so forth, right? To my mind, when I hear, as I did from Craig, that there was like 900 new apps came out of CodeJam or CodeJam, down the back there over the last 48 hours, I just wonder how much of that is ever going to be captured and A, monetized, and B, made available so that there's an awareness. I mean, how many videos did we record for startups? Was it over 100? Something like that?
Yeah, it was in that ballpark, yeah.
What happened to any of that resource,
Right, yeah.
I think, the company can talk all it likes about developers, yeah? But it has to be able to address the needs of the ones and twos. The development heroes, right? I mean, they make a big deal, and they take photographs of, people we know and love. But what are they going to do to capture the value?
Yeah.
Because, so much stuff is going to end up commodity. But if we're going to talk new stuff, no, that will not be commodity, and there will need to be a huge pool of shared resource. I'd love to know what's going to happen there.
I think so, and it is vitally important, I think, for them to resolve that because they're positioning HANA Cloud Platform now very prominently, and how they hope to differentiate against competitors that perhaps don't have that type of ability to build out solutions. But the vibrant developer community is a big part of that picture, and so hopefully they're willing to jump through the hoops, because I know it can probably get frustrating if you talk to an individual developer and they're bringing up this point and this point and this issue and that issue, and it's like a lot of them are pretty deeply entrenched, like, I can't get on the vendor list, and there's liability issues if we put your solution on our paper and all this stuff. But it's like, what? Like I told someone today from SAP, they asked me how we're doing with the cloud platform, and I said, well, your barometer should be the individual developers, not your partners, because a lot of your partners are getting going, and that's great. They have resources to throw at these problems, but your individual developers, they're your barometer. If they become your advocates, then you've changed the whole script.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think I think SAP just needs to do a couple of things, right? One is it needs to remove this notion of KPIs being attached to absolutely everything, right?
Yeah.
So, Craig told me he has a KPI of a certain number of code jams this year. He's done them, right?
Right.
Why does that KPI even exist? You do as many as you can, or as many as the market will demand.
Until you basically fall down.
Well, in his case, yeah. I mean, we need to clone Craig, right? But then when it comes to some of these newer things,
Right.
I don't know where the KPIs are going to come from because they're so new.
Yeah.
What do you know, right? And to that extent, I would like to see SAP consider this new stuff as pure investment. It's purely an investment. And sometimes you're going to place bets and they're not going to win, right?
Yeah.
And SAP's done plenty of that, right? Sometimes you're going to place bets and they're going to win big style.
Yeah.
But you don't know right now. You just do not know.
Well, we're getting to a lot of years since you presented to Bill McDermott on a napkin your vision of easily consumable apps.
Yep.
You know?
Yeah. But
We're getting long in the tooth here, bro.
yeah, but the truth of the matter is that it's starting to get there, selling them, you know?
Yeah. No, they absolutely.
Just took a little while. I mean, this is...
Well,
look,
Becker's digital startup essentially is making some headway on some of this stuff.
yes, it is.
They're providing some momentum. You met with Naoki, I think.
Yep. Yeah, we had a good conversation around the new stuff, and again, it's, there's a lot to look forward to, I think, and again, one of the things I'd like to emphasize, and especially for the benefit of some of our analyst colleagues, right, and that is that contrary to so much opinion out there, the backbone of SAP, yes, it's there, but it's starting to become a fraction of what they really do, right? Yeah. For instance, talking to Mike Eckert yesterday, trying to understand how you integrate and implement seismic data that comes from sensors and telematics type stuff from ag tech. How do you actually do all of that in the context of HCP, right? SAP has to heft all manner of different types of metric, different formats for those metrics, in ways that a very, very, very few vendors on the planet have to. And they should be given credit for that because we're seeing a lot of emerging stuff there.
Well, yeah, our customer shoots, when folks take a look at our playlist, very few of them are about, we had to upgrade our accounts payable and our ERP. They're doing interesting stuff.
Completely irrelevant.
I just interviewed the state of Indiana. They're using HANA for an infant mortality project that's really cool, and that's typical of the stuff that's going on now. And so I think, it would be stupid to underestimate what SAP is trying to accomplish. It's just that our job is to try to keep everyone honest, including ourselves. So,
well, yeah, I mean, you can end up drinking your own Kool-Aid a little bit too much, but coming out of this tech, I came into this TechEd thinking that it's going to be important, and I've come out of this TechEd thinking, yes, it is important. The messages, we always say this, the messages aren't polished. They never bloody well are with this company for some reason. It's a source of constant frustration, I guess. But I think that there's a lot more to talk about that's tangible. Yeah. And I think that's the fundamental difference. The final thing that I wanted to say was that the emphasis that SAP is putting on youth is really, really important. When I spoke to Bill McDermott at the beginning of the week about this, and apparently it's been incredibly well received in Germany, of all places. Yeah. Vital stuff. Yep. Vital to, reboot the University Alliances type stuff, which, you've got a big passion for that. Yeah,
they brought some students to the inclusion event that you and I attended, which Stacy Fish, part of our team that has the misfortune of handling us for the week, she put together, and mixing students in with other SAP professionals and having just honest dialogue, and they were peppering me with questions.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Come on, tell me how they really nailed you.
Well, they were like, I got 3 job offers. Which one do I take? Oh
yeah.
That's a hard question, right? I mean, without knowing the offers and anything.
Yeah.
And then they're like, well, it's like, give us some more information. And I'm like, well, what do you want to know? And they're like, well, how do we succeed in this field today? And and when you have a young person asking you that question, I think you take it seriously, because these are people who spent like a couple years in college, like invested in this curriculum, right? They kind of bet some time on this thing, and I love that curiosity, right? They just kind of put me on the spot at the way young people do. They've done it to you on camera before, so you know the feeling. But,
I do.
But I think I definitely tip my cap to SAP for trying to mix the students in like that and just interact as part of the show, and I'm sure that's going to help. Because these transitions are not easy. I mean, even if you have 10 or 20 years of SAP experience, in some ways that can work against you. In some ways, there's a lot of change in the air, and I think SAP's done a good job on that front. And So anyway, and they've given us a lot of fodder to work with this week, and so I credit our team for helping us. With that.
I mean, we've recorded. I think this will be 15 or 16 videos,
right around that.
And I've looked at every one of them, and it's like actually there's some really good content in here.
Yeah,
imagine
that.
Yeah, there's not a lot of fluff, I have to say.
No.
So.
Well, and to their credit, they don't try to get us to interview a bunch of executives anymore. They really
they've given up, haven't they?
Yeah, they're like, oh, don't put the executives. I mean, you grilled Steve Lucas a little bit, but that was it. Like the rest of them were customers.
Well, Steve Lucas, I mean, it was important to
had to have him. Yeah.
It was important to have him because I mean, he was the lead guy in the keynote. There's only so much you can do in a limited period of time when you're on stage. And whenever you're on stage, you're taking a huge number of risks. So he really took a lot of risks. And of course, that leaves people with lots and lots of different questions. So, and I'm glad that I'm very glad and very pleased that he took the time to sit with us. I think do you know what? If there's one regret, that is that there's a couple of guys that I think I would have liked to have had on the couch as well, for different reasons. But other than that, I'm pretty tired. I'm done. Hey, we should say goodbye to Millie.
Yeah, goodbye to Millie, the tropical plant.
Yeah,
really did its job. Not so much heavy lifting on this shoot because it's on the side, but when you had the two people here.
Absolutely. In fact, we've been here so long that Millie's starting to come into flower.
Starting to actually bloom even in this like desperate environment that we find ourselves in here in the bowels of Las Vegas.
Anyway.
The final comment I just want to make for folks is I would say keep an eye on the Barcelona stream because they are going to be touching on some more S4HANA stuff there, and we'll probably blog about it as well. So.
Well, I won't be there, will you?
But we'll catch the keynote and we'll do the peanut gallery thing, which.
Oh yeah, I love that.
Which we're so good at. You're good at taking the piss from the outside, so you'll do that. You know what I'm talking about.
I do indeed.
Pleasure.
Anyway, boys and girls, sports fans, until the next time. It's the end of another digital dump from Dan and Jon.